The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in again this week. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, joining you live from Dallas, which is home base for me. If you don't know me yet, I'm a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, organizational logotherapist, inspirational speaker, social scientist, and author. I help organizations develop their team into inspirational leaders and create cultures where people actually want to come to work and do their best. I provide programs like Grab Your Gusto that enable individual team members to discover and unleash their passion and purpose at work to catalyze fulfillment, engagement, and productivity across the entire organization. You can learn more about me and how we can work together at alisecortez.com and gusto-now.com. Let me thank my partner and sponsor, WorkProud. We are a perfect collaboration. Everyone wants to know they matter and the work they do is appreciated and is meaningful. WorkProud helps companies do just that through their mobile platform that is built to encourage employees to share stories and recognize each other's contribution. WorkProud empowers HR and business leaders to help create company cultures where all employees are inspired to feel proud of their work and proud of their company. Learn more at workproud.com. With us today is Natalie Benamou, the CEO of Her Power to Lead. Her company's premier product is HerCsuite membership, a game changer for the way women accelerate results to get business done. She is also the host of HerCsuite Radio, a podcast for women leaders on the move. We'll be talking about how she started this venture in the pandemic and what she has learned women need to ascend in their careers. She joins today from Elgin, Illinois. Natalie, welcome to Working on Purpose.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Right? Is this just great gobs of fun? It should be like this, right? Just like this.
Yes.
Well, I'm happy to share you with our listeners across the world, of course, half of which are women. And so to get right into this content, let's just go straight for the jugular, shall we?
Yes.
Let's start by talking about how women are feeling in today's climate. You talk about some stats that you got from Deloitte that I think really paint a kind of a grim picture. Can you share them with us?
Yes. Well, it's interesting. I think everyone can relate to this. And I was asked today, well, how did men do with this? So for the men listening, let's hear from you. But what I have found with the Deloitte survey that you mentioned, and they tested 5,000 women. They asked 5,000 women. And the stats are telling of how being siloed has impacted women. So the stats that you're referring to is 51% feel less optimistic about their career. 57% are planning on leaving their jobs within the next 2 years. And the most, I think what you're saying is the troubling one, is 77% of women feel overwhelmed. And I think if we talk to anyone in our circle of any kind of, whether it's community, whether it's people we work with, whatever, I think that's universal. Women are feeling overwhelmed and aren't sure where to go to for help.
Mm-hmm. So let's unpack this a little bit, and we can each sort of weigh in what we've learned about this. What's contributing to these factors, these stats?
Well, I think obviously the pandemic and the stress that women are experiencing, even if whether you're married and you're a mom, or whether you're taking care of your parents, whatever it might be, there's this added factor in our life in the last year and a half. In addition to, there's no separation. People aren't getting in their cars and driving someplace. Even though we would complain in Chicago, like, oh, I've got this commute. You kind of miss the commute, right? I mean, because it gave you this downtime, whether you're getting on the phone with a girlfriend or listening to radio like this, either way, we're not all commuting anymore. I know many companies are returning back to the office. It depends on the company, whether they're returning back or not. But either way, the remote work, it's hard to separate. And so pile on even more demands, even more opportunities that they're being told are opportunities, but really is just more work.
Mm-hmm. So some of the things that I've learned by continually talking to other subject matter experts and business leaders, and then of course reading, is that if you haven't heard about the Great Resignation, it's alive and well. And for those of you listeners and viewers who don't know what we're talking about, that's a stat that was actually predicted that at least half the workforce would want to leave their jobs right about now. So we're seeing a prediction of anywhere from 35 to over 50% of people in at least North America plan to change their jobs sometime this year in 2021 because of this pent-up feeling of not being able to grow and not being connected anymore to their organization and many other factors. So really just an awful lot of stuff going on to treat, it sounds like to me.
It is. And also, 2.2 million women left the workforce, just left last year. That is a staggering number of people when we represented, and I say past tense because now we're not 51% if 2.2 million of us left. But that, on top of the Great Resignation, is a sign that people are reevaluating and wanting to live their purpose, which is what you're about, but thinking about work-life balance and what matters. I hear from people in my community of, what used to matter, like driven to get to that C-suite or driven to get to that next level. They're sort of like, you know what? Life is really short and I don't care about it anymore as much as I used to,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I think, also concerning because people on the track to lead organizations are now even backing away and saying, you know what, this just isn't worth it to me. The sacrifice I'm making to my health, to my mental well-being, or to my family or, relations isn't worth it.
Mm-hmm. Extremely important points that you're making, Natalie. And let's go a little bit further here. I forget where I read this or where I saw this, but when you start thinking about how many women actually chose to leave the workforce or just felt like they didn't have a choice but to leave the workforce, how that's setting back their incomes, their retirement, and even their career trajectory. So there's some real ramifications to whether they chose it because they wanted a more fully inclusive work-life harmony, or whether they just didn't feel like they have a choice. That's just a lot of backstepping for women in terms of money and career.
It is. And I want to give a shout out to a new friend of mine, Jenny Galuzzo at The Second Shift. The Second Shift was started 7 years ago, but they really have exponentially grown. And The Second Shift is for women exactly in this place where they felt no choice. They have their children at home and they have to homeschool or whatever that looked like, or a sick family member, but they're very qualified. They're educated. They're women in the workforce that have been there for a while. And The Second Shift offers women a great resource, both for companies who need to hire because they are losing people, and for people that are looking for that flexibility. So shout out to Jenny today.
Awesome. Way to go, Jenny. Yes, we're talking about becoming on my show too. Who knows? But
yes, you should.
Yeah, I love talking to people that are up to something that can advance the conversation that we've already had in the last 6.5 years of being on air about how to create cultures people can actually meaningfully engage in their work, give their best talents and skills, and that they're inspired and that they're part of an organization that betters the world. That's what we're up to on Working on Purpose Radio. So anybody who could advance that conversation, I'd love to talk to you.
Great. I will do that. I will give you an intro for sure.
Okay, good. Now, as we go on here, ladies and gentlemen, let me talk to you men. You know that this show serves both men and women. Today, we're talking about women. And there are many other times where we've had different shows just talking about men. But I do want to distinguish, what's really going on for women, because every group of people often needs their own touch. They need their own sort of way to be cared for, and which is what you're up to be able to help women. So I want to next talk about why women in leadership are important to organizations. What do women bring that are important?
The stats that I'm so glad that Warren Buffett champions, and he's the 38, which is kind of in a way sad because 38% is what he was going for, which would be 38% of women in leadership. But Warren Buffett has said, and here's a billionaire who's very successful in investment, has said, the companies that he now only invests in companies that have women in the C-suite because financially they do better. So while that's true, we still have this statistic that 41% of the Fortune 500 are women CEOs. So there's a little bit of a big disconnect for those numbers. And what does that do to the bottom line? And so then you kind of come full circle to what's happening with the exodus of people in the workplace, with women leaving work, feeling like there's not an opportunity. But women do bring economic prosperity to a company. So that, I think, is an undisputed fact. But also the way that they get there is different. So a man will look at a job opportunity, and I'm friends with men, so don't take this the wrong way.
I like men, yeah.
Distinction on how we approach things, because our brains are wired, as you know, our brains go one way and men's brains go a different way. But men will look at a job description, there's 10 things, and they see one, and they're like, I got this. I'm just going to go ahead, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Women look at the same list, and maybe they have 8 out of 10. And they're like, well, I guess I got to roll up my sleeves, perfect those other 2, raise my hand, and then I will apply for that opportunity. Now, you flip that to what happens behind the scenes, and this is why sponsors are so important. So you talk about women in the workforce and what do they bring. Men are very important to women advancing, and a sponsor especially. One of my favorite stories is Mike Kaufman, who's a CEO at Cardinal Health. He's a big proponent for women and advancing women. And one day he just walked into a conversation with VPs, and they were evaluating an opportunity for a woman. And the room was like, you know what? She's got young children. She's not going to want to travel. I don't think we should offer this to her. Mm-hmm. Already making the decision. And he said, hold up. Have you asked her if she wants the job?
Right.
No, we haven't asked her.
We just
turned out that they did ask her, and she did take the job because she worked it out with her husband and family and how to care for her children. Imagine what would happen what would have happened if he wasn't in that room. Well, that happens all the time. So we're trying to get to leadership, and there's these conversations of assumptions that women don't want to advance, or they're stuck in the middle, and they're stuck in the middle because people are making assumptions about their choices without even asking them. Mm-hmm. So I encourage the men in the audience, ask women, would you be interested? Now, some women aren't interested. That's okay. The lattice goes left and right and up and down. But it's important to have those conversations and to ask if you're interested in it.
Yeah, and not assume, because it's kind of a paternalistic thing to do. Like you think you're doing this person a favor by helping them out and not putting too much on them, and it's just the opposite. You're stopping their career. And so let's do 2 things really quick to what you just said, Natalie. So on the other side of that woman who sees that she's got 8 of the 10 requirements, so she should roll up her sleeves and work on those things. The other side of that then is that a lot of times there's sort of a diligence that women bring, because of just the way that they've navigated the career workspace that can be incredibly useful inside organizations, right? So that's the first thing. How that translates to some of the work that I do in the nonprofit space. I'm on the board of an organization called Namaste Direct, and they're an organization that serves Guatemalan businesswomen with microloans and business education to take them from poverty to at least the middle class, and they only invest in women. The reason they do that is because women, this is true of many other organizations, not just this organization, but many nonprofits will only invest in women because they are responsible in terms of how they repay the loans. They take and plow the money and the resources back into the community. And it's a way to lift a community faster than it is just straight through investing in men. Men use those kind of resources differently. So there's some real dynamite power in women that I want to make sure that we showcase here.
Absolutely. Women are, well, I'm biased because I have a company called Her Power Too, which is inspired about gaining power, and HerCsuite, which is also about surrounding ourselves and creating our own C-suite. So I'm a little biased.
You are, and rightly so, because it allows you. We're going to talk more as we go along here about what you're doing in those. But before we get into that, let's also talk quickly about the difference between the path to leadership for men and women. How do they each how would you distinguish those paths?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, men are in a way operating in a different mindset. But what does that mean economically? So Harvard Business Review just came out with a study that men in their 40s, and please, men in the audience, don't take this the wrong way. I'm just giving the stats from Harvard Business Review, which is a very respected resource. Men in their 40s make 55% more than women with the same education background and the same profession. So you think to yourself, well, how is that possible? Exponentially, as women and men go on the same path, if they start out different, you never recoup. And so by the time you're mid-career, you are hugely disproportionate with what you are earning as a woman compared to your male counterpart. And so and a lot of times we don't even know what that difference is, but that disparity really is part of the thing that is impacting how people get to the leadership, because women are taking on a different burden with the family and with whatever else is in their life, on top of trying to climb the lattice or climb up.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said and beautifully situated, and a perfect way to take us into our first break, Natalie. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We're on the air with Natalie Benamou, who's the CEO of Her Power to Lead. We've been talking a bit about what's going on in the workplace for women and some of the obstacles they face. After the break, we're going to talk more about what she's created and the platform that she's made to help these women ascend. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'd like to invite you to check out my book, Purpose Ignited, How Inspiring Leaders Ignite Passion and Elevate Cause, which is now on Amazon. I wrote that book to awaken readers to their passion and purpose and help transform them into inspirational leaders who enliven the workplace and elevate the contribution of business to all its stakeholders. I also use this content as a basis for my inspirational leadership and Grab Your Gusto programs. If you're just joining the program today, my guest is Natalie Benamou, the CEO of Her Power to Lead. Her company's premier product is HerCsuite membership, a game changer for the way women accelerate results to get business done. She's also the host of HerCsuite Radio, a podcast for women leaders on the move. She joins us today from Elgin, Illinois. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. So next, Natalie, let's talk about this amazing thing. Here I'm talking about birthing books. You birthed a platform, and you did it, in this pandemic. So let's first talk about, before we get into what's behind all that, you've got a suite of offerings to help women navigate and develop their careers. What have you discovered that women really need to help them along?
It's so interesting. A year and a half ago, and it's hard to believe it's been a year and a half because we used to say like a few months ago, but now, it's been a bit. When I was in the trade show industry for 29 years, and I had been doing this career because I was always good at it and I kept accelerating, and so I never left the career. And anyone that knows trade shows last year knows that every trade show stopped. Yeah. The world, all events. So you do events, everything. I mean, it was before we went to the virtual, so everything was just like, okay, they're all canceled. And just one by one, things were canceling. Trucks would show up to the trade show floor and they were turning them away and saying like, we're done, go away. So amidst all of that, navigating huge change for my company. I led a team and trying to help my company pivot. I kind of got quiet and started listening. And I asked people, what is it that you really need? And over again, what we talked about earlier, I feel siloed. I don't know who to turn to for advice. I feel alone. I'm overwhelmed. When I look for support, if you Google advancing women, 120 million options on the internet show up. 120 million. It's no wonder we feel overwhelmed. So how can you simplify that and help women accelerate results? And so for me, I started studying like you. I like to read, I take courses, I immerse myself in several courses and try to really understand what does that look like. And so what it looked like for me was, all right, let's start to do something where we can make real change happen. And that happens when we create our own suite of advisors. We create our C-suite, if you will, and surround ourselves, because the saying of we surround ourselves with the five, what we become is the five people we surround ourselves with, is very true. So I started helping out my friends, which were mostly, executive women. So it was executive women that were reaching out, and I was reaching out to my friends and, hey, what do you need? Let's create this mastermind executive, board for each other. And so we created a membership platform, and it's evolved over the last year. And now we've opened it up to mentoring in all phases of women's careers in a framework that helps women. But it started out with listening and what is it that you really need? And at the end of the day, people need to feel valued, understood, and, know where to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the other thing that I would add to that I don't know if you found that, but I've found that in the work that I do with organizations, and then of course the groups of people that I work with inside organizations, is I really think maybe people wouldn't identify this as something that they need, but it's a tremendous benefit, and that is they need to be challenged in a respectful way, challenged to grow, challenged to reach. Right? You can do more than that. You are more than that. I think that's really important, right? I mean, I have to thank the people that have pushed me along the way. I had a coach for over a year who I wouldn't be doing I would not be living my purpose today if it wasn't for him. And he really, scratched me and clawed at me and said, hey, what about that? So along those lines, I also want to applaud what you first said when I asked you that question about, what did you learn? And you said, I began to listen. So listeners and viewers, I can't tell you the number of times people have said to me, Alise, I don't even know where to start looking for my purpose. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. That's the first place. Listen, be quiet, listen to what's that little voice inside of you that's trying so desperately to get your attention, just like Natalie got. That's just golden, Natalie, what you just told us there. So to that end, now what I want to do next is I want to talk about how in the world that you made this leap, right? 29 years in the events space, and you decided to jump into entrepreneurship. Tell us the story of how you made that decision and made it happen.
So it's interesting because I really believe that our best ideas come when we're in the valleys of difficulty, right? And, I mentioned earlier that I was leading this team, but in the trade show industry, universally, people went on partial unemployment, they were furloughed, we were, something I had never experienced in my life. So you're in this really depth, right? Of like, okay, what is it that I really like doing? And it's your values, identity, and purpose. Your VIP, as my executive coach likes to call. Who am I as a leader? And I started thinking about years ago, and I've served on multiple boards as president of nonprofits, but the greatest joy came when I was president of the Healthcare Business Women's Association, and we had 850 members, is over 7,000 worldwide, but I was Chicago chapter. I had 19 people on my board, and I really loved seeing how what we did made a difference for one person. You lift one person up, the whole platform of women rise, right? Like you're doing. I think what you're doing is amazing. So I want to find out more about what you're doing maybe after we do this, because I think it's amazing. But so I really thought, okay, what do I really love? I love empowering and advancing women. So turning purpose into, passion into purpose is what I did with creating her C-suite and trying to find a way to make people feel valued and appreciated and not alone, because it has been a very lonely ride for so many.
Mm-hmm. Well, it couldn't have been easy to jump off the train, right? I mean, let's just talk about knees knocking and like wondering, what in the world am I doing?
Yes.
Whose crazy idea was this? Who put this in my brain?
I've wanted to be an entrepreneur for a long time. And what happened years ago, I got my MBA and I thought, that's it. I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And then success started happening because I understood business better and clients would come to me, and I had a client, many of my clients have been with me for the whole career. So that tells you relationships are really important to me. And it was so hard to leave my relationships, but I'm now starting to reconnect in a different way. So it's very enriching, but it was very hard because here are these people I've known for my entire adult practically life, right? And like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And you sure you want to do that? Yes, I do. I know this is the thing. And so sometimes, Denzel Washington has this amazing video, Fall Forward. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it, where he talks about it at a inauguration address at a college. It's this idea of like, you just have to go forward for it. If you don't, I don't want to look back and say, what would happen if, and yes, it was terrifying, but I know that when I help one person, it's an adrenaline, it's dopamine. You know this, it's dopamine in our brains when we help someone and live with a grateful heart. So.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to say that what you just shared that was so powerful, by the way. So yes, this, as you and I spoke about before we got on air, I'm a logotherapist, which means that I'm trained in this practice of centering meaning, because meaning is our central concern, and it's our energy element as well. And one of the things we know about from logotherapy is that when we're in a state of self-transcendence, we're serving other people. That's when we're really our most vital. So yes, finding a way to serve other people is critical. And it also overlaps, by the way, to purpose. Purpose is also about serving other people. And the other thing I wanted to say about what you just said about, you were convicted that this is the right thing for me. So what happens for us, ladies and gentlemen, when we really discover our purpose and we allow it to work through us, is it gives us this crazy courage, this crazy confidence to do things we wouldn't otherwise do when we're not high on purpose. It's amazing. So it's really worth the trouble looking for it. And what it does, it translates to what Natalie has done, what I like to call agency and grit. So this thing about human agency, the ability to make something happen, right? That's amazing. And doesn't it feel amazing to know that you stood this thing up?
Yes. And, persistence pays off is one of my mantras. So I'm very persistent in this effort, for sure. I also, everybody has those moments of self-doubt. So I want to speak to your audience who may, people, there's all these different things of beliefs of imposter syndrome. But let me tell you, when you've been doing the same thing your whole, let's say I was 5 when I started 29 years ago. And when you've been doing something your whole career, and then you're like faced with this opportunity, you have moments where you're, I don't know, is this the right thing, right? I mean, why did I do this? So one of my advisors, Judy Robinette, who I think the world of, said to me one day, she said, you need to tell yourself over and over, I am perfect for the part. And that's where the grit comes in and the just resilience, because if you tell yourself you're perfect for the part, even when you're not ready, you are in this moment perfect for what you're doing. So whatever your audience is facing, just remember that you are perfect for what it is that you dream to be epic. And don't sell yourself short on your dream, because life is short.
That's beautiful, Natalie. And that speaks to something that I talk about all the time, the importance of how you talk to yourself. We can beat ourselves up terribly and talk about all the ways we're never going to make this work, about why we're going to fail. It's so important to teach ourselves to talk good and kindly and encouragingly to ourselves, and to get help from other people to do that, which I'm sure you do in your program. That's where I want to go next. So I know you said your purpose is to empower women. So how did you devise your platform and your offerings to do that?
So I started asking again my friends to do this to ride along with me. And I want to just tell you that 2 of them, without realizing what they did for me today, reached out. One of them said, how can I help you? Now, she's been working around the clock on a huge project. She took time out of her day and said, how can I help you? Just doing that means it touches my heart beyond, I can't even express it. But she's been on this journey. So I started out with 11 amazing women. So this tiny cohort of 2 circles, I call them. And we just started doing these masterminds. And it started out as weekly because it was crazy in October last year. So, we had time. It was a little slower paced. So we were like, every week, let's meet. We're going to talk. We're going to get, and then it went to twice a month, and now it's once a month. But, and it's grown since then. But really, it's about listening and making a plan, challenging people, and helping. I need help is one of the things that we do. What is it that you need help with? Sharing information and having a topic of interest that challenges you to make you rise. You level up. It's like the sports teams. Children that play with levels that are beyond them level up to that level up. So we need to surround ourselves with people that are at a level and a vibration level that's higher than us, so that we can rise to that.
Mm-hmm. That is so beautiful. And yeah, to your point too about just, being challenged in a meaningful way. And sometimes in your friend reaching out to you just out of the blue to offer help. It is amazing. And I try to, this is one of my passions is to practice random acts of kindness. So every day I find someone that I can recognize or applaud and lift. And I'm always amazed, like simple things. I go to the grocery store and I always go looking, scan the crowd. My 18-year-old daughter's like, all right, who's it going to be? Who are you going to talk to? But I always go looking, and I love to lift a woman. So I love to tell a woman that she's beautiful, for example. And every single time, only one time, every single time they're surprised and they're taken aback. They're like, thank you so much. And they smile, and they get bigger and they're stand, and they walk away taller, and I feel better. Everybody wins, right? Mm-hmm. Only one time has a woman said to me when I told her she was beautiful, I know. And I thought, well, good for her. Who knows, rock on.
Yeah. Well, I know you're in Dallas and I'm in the Midwest, but my girls call it my Midwest friendly. So I go to the grocery store and I do the same thing. I start talking to them and, whoever's at the checkout or whatever, and just try to engage, because maybe that person is alone.
Yeah.
And you don't know. And especially now, people are just craving to have conversation, and lifting someone up it's free.
Yeah.
That's what I think people don't realize.
Free and yet priceless, right? Free and yet priceless. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, with that, let's grab our next break here. I'm Alise Cortez, your host. We've been on the air with Natalie Benamou. She's the CEO of Her Power to Lead. We've been talking a bit about how she started this platform and what she's offering. After the break, we're going to get more into some of those details. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us, and welcome back to Working on Purpose. One other bit of news that I want to share with you is that this anthology that I've been working on for the last 2 years is about to come to life. It's about to be released. It's a collection of 25 stories of women that I recruited from around the world who are sharing their stories, all the gory details of how they discovered their purpose and now how they're serving from it. And so I'm so proud of it. I could just bust, and it's just beautiful. And by the way, speaking of what Natalie said earlier, I organized those stories by path to purpose. And one path to purpose is passion, just like Natalie's talking about. So that's coming up very shortly. You can find it on Amazon. So excited about that. If you're just joining us today, my guest is Natalie Benamou. She's the CEO of Her Power to Lead. She's also the host of HerCsuite Radio, a podcast for women leaders on the move. She joins today from Elgin, Illinois. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. So for this next bit here, I wanted to roll up our sleeves and talk about just really how your magic works. And so before we do that, though, I want to hear a little bit about how you've been able to bridge those worlds of the older worlds to the new world. So how have you been able to leverage your past knowledge and your network to launch HerCsuite?
Well, what's really funny is that when I left trade shows, sometimes when you leave something, you think, okay, I'm done. I can't do trade shows ever again.
Right.
And you're like, I'm not even going to do events. I don't want to do any events. I'm just going to do this. And then slowly things start to sink into your lives, right? So it started with, we're going to host some events and I'm going to have speakers. Of course, I'm going to have speakers. Why wouldn't I? I love having speakers. So we started with that. And then I love creating alliances. And when we were talking about earlier about women feeling siloed, guess what is more siloed than women? Women organizations. You think about how many organizations women belong to, and that we don't talk amongst ourselves, right? Like we have our separate ways and we're in our own lane, and there's no mall of women organizations. There's no like central place. We're all just like going on the super highway to advancement. And so it's kind of twofold of what we're doing. So speaking of like what's happening is that the trade show part of me couldn't part ways entirely. So we are evolving into creating a evergreen environment for women organizations to have our own trade show virtually with booths and opportunities to speed network and have events, and that's evolving in the next 6 months. So I wasn't able to fully leave my trade show, but tangentially side to that is lifting women up with advisory circles that we talked about earlier, and then our mentoring program. So kind of leveraging all the things. I try to take from each of the best things that I've learned and bring it together into some ways of helping lift women up.
I had an image as you were talking, and I have to share it. First, I love what you've shared here. Why would you want to just throw away all of that knowledge and experience, right? But I had an image that, here you are, you're going through your career, 29 years in the events business, and you created this beautiful vehicle, right? This whatever you want to put it on it, whether it's a sports car or whatever it is. But you created this beautiful vehicle. And then as you started your new company here, you were bolting on additional parts and different features, right? Now it looks like a totally different vehicle, but it still works like a vehicle, right? Why would you let go of all those additional, the tires and the engine that were working so well before, that really well, right? So to me, the reason I wanted you to talk about that is for our listeners and viewers who are trying to figure out a way to step into their next, there's probably a lot they can do to be able to take and bolt on their past career and what they know and those competencies into what they want to do anew. And what you've done is gorgeous. I mean, I can see that being just incredibly robust.
Well, that's very kind of you. And I have to say something else. Another kind of aha moment is that I was in business development my whole career. I sold over $110 million, and I never really thought of it as any kind of big deal. Okay, so I just did it because I'm good at it. I love relationship building. And recently I've been on 2 programs where people are like, we want to know like your secret sauce. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, talk to us about sales. And I was like, oh, I left the sales thing like with the trade shows. It's behind me. And they're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So I would say to your listeners that even if you start embarking on your 2.0 or 3.0, don't ever totally throw the water out. Don't throw the bathwater out with the baby, because you can still leverage things that you were good at, and maybe you just didn't even acknowledge that you were, but everyone around you might have known it, and you just sort of said, well, it's just something that comes naturally to me. So embrace your whole self, whatever it is that you're going to do next, because that's really important to show up authentically to your community, to your people, whatever it might be.
Oh, I got to grab that one, Natalie, because I'm a Gallup certified strengths coach. So that thing that is just so natural and easy for you, those are your strengths. And just because they're easy for you doesn't mean that they're not tremendously valued to other people. Just because, so I always like to say it like this. So when you recognize, Superman can jump over tall buildings, do you think that, he expects you to jump over tall buildings? No, you have your own strengths, right? So your opportunity to be able to really distinguish yourself in life and really make a contribution that's worthy of your one precious life, as I like to say, is to really discover those strengths, those talents, and your passion and your purpose, and then just bring them, right? So, but you got to see the light, as if you will, to be able to recognize that these things are actually your strengths and that they're useful. So that was a gold nugget right there you gave us, Natalie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so next I want to talk about this notion of showcasing what you've been able to do. So one of the things that I absolutely love about what I get to do as a person who's been in development for years is I love to literally watch people's molecules change right in front of my eyes as I watch them get a major aha or insight, or they ascend into a higher station of themselves. That is the most amazing thing to see. So can you share a story of how your program has helped a woman reach her higher being?
Well, there's two examples. One is our executive coach, who is a mentor to me and has really helped me in my career, Lori Wessels. She has two sayings. She likes to put the smile on corporate America, which I love. And she always says, I'm the fun one. So, which is true. She is. But she has this metaphor of riding the wave of transformation and sharing her light out on the ocean. And when you asked me that question, I just thought of like, Lori has this visual. And so when we think about our values, identity, and purpose, what does that look like in 3D for you? Because it's words, right? Like it's easy to say like, well, my purpose is I'm passionate about women, but what does that look like as we lift other people up? And so I think of Lori and how she rides the wave of transformation and how she shines her light out. And there's other women in our community who shine their, Melanie Neal, who shines her beacon of light out and always is reaching out to others and lifting them up and recognizing them. And she's another one who reached out to me today, actually, out of the blue, just like, hey, just wanted to, so there's those people. And then I got to watch Lori in action, where one of our members was trying to decide she was going to either go down a path of buying a company or she was going to go back to corporate America. She ended up taking a very big chief procurement officer role, but Lori helped walk her through those decisions. What do I like doing? It's a very simple exercise, right? What do I like doing? What fills me up? And what could I, do without, right? And in that process, it really helped her identify, well, she really missed being in corporate, and now she's taken on this big role. So Anne has taken this giant leap, and her molecules are lighting the sky for us all.
That is so brilliant. You just made me think of something, so I'll share on my side too. I'm working with a client right now where I'm doing it's an 8-week leadership program, and of course it's done virtually in this case, it's women across the United States. And they just last week finished their last program where they had to present. And what was so great about it, Natalie, I bet you can relate to this, is they each had to share in their groups. There were 25 on the call, and there were 4 teams, and everybody in the team had to have a speaking part. And one of the women, I could see it because I'd been working with her. She was falling apart. She was having a very hard time delivering her piece, and she was, sort of stuttering and trying to get through it and such. And I could see it. And so she'd always been really involved in all the other sessions. And I'm like, gosh, what's going on here? And so at the end of the session, where everybody had presented, she came up and she spotlighted herself. And she said, I just want to say how hard that was for me. I'm the only one that speaks English as a far distant language. And I was so struggling with that. And I said, oh my gosh, your growth. We could all see her in the moment, her molecules changing as she reached for that and struggled with it and kept on. And I said, you're going to get more out of this program than the rest of us did because of how hard you worked. We saw you transform in those moments, right? Persevering on the other side, right? It's so beautiful. And then to be able to hold her in that space so she feels it, she gets it. She doesn't walk away feeling embarrassed. She walks away with well-deserved value and pride for what she's come through and what she's achieved. So important.
What you're describing, what I'm thinking of is grace.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking earlier about it's so easy to be hard on ourselves. What did she go to first? She didn't give herself grace and say, that was so hard, but even though I got emotional and even though it was like not what I expected, I did it. I finished. Instead of that grace, she went to the other side, which we all tend to do, which is like, here's what I didn't do. Here's what I wish I could have done. Here's how I thought it was going to go and it didn't. So I would encourage everyone listening, think about just giving yourself a break and grace that look at what you did and celebrate your wins. Even if it's small, we need to celebrate our own wins, even if it's just getting out of bed today. Some days it is hard to put those feet on the ground and make a step forward. And so I think that's a wonderful story you shared. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome. So welcome. And so let's just show you how we could do that, listeners and viewers. How could we give ourselves grace if we were this young woman? She could actually go into that and go, I'm the only one of the people that are in this group that speaks language as a third or fourth language. And I'm going to come and I'm going to present. I'm the only one who's doing that. I'm really working at this, right? That's a way to turn that around. So for us to be able to model what it is we're teaching you. So,
I love it.
Right?
I'm a judge for the HALT prize. If you've heard of it, HULT prize. It's $1 million prize for social entrepreneurs that are in college around the world, 3,000. And I got to sit in. What made me think of this is I'm sitting in on pitch competitions with people from not in this country. Most of them were from, fourth world and third world. And they came up with these amazing innovations and, how to turn fish and, CO2 into like a sustainable food in someone's apartment because they're being bombed outside, just crazy stuff that they were solving, food issue that they're solving. And it was just amazing to see, even if their English wasn't, because none of them really had English. Many of them didn't have English as their first language, but seeing what they did and what they came together for, it's so uplifting, and celebrating that is so important. So I think if we come across people that are doing that, give them the congratulations and lift them up and say, wow, you did this. You're amazing.
Yeah. Well, I speak 5 different languages, and the other 4, of course, are Romance languages. And I'm telling you, it's hard to make yourself understood in another language. It takes a bit. So really quick, we're coming to the end of our call, but I really want to get 3 more things out of you. So one is I wanted you to speak in on this topic here of living on your edge. So I had a great guest on my show a few weeks ago named Gabriel Kazan, and his whole thing is about helping men discover their purpose. Great guest. He said something interesting. He said men are at their best when they live at their edge. But I think that's true for women too. When we're literally reaching from the top of our toes to our fingertips for what we strive for. And what I also know through logotherapy is we need that tension between who we are being today and who we're trying to become tomorrow. But what's your perspective on that matter? Do women need edge too?
Oh, well, I think we need edge, and everyone thrives in different ways. For me, I thrive in the last minute challenge of like, okay, I'm going to finish this and, not let perfection slow me down, but in that very last minute push to be on right before going on. And it's like that adrenaline rush. So everybody functions a little bit differently, but I think women have the edge. They exhibit the edge all the time, and we all can live in that way. It just depends on how we apply it.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, I know for me, I definitely am at my best when I live at my edge.
For sure.
Okay, so next thing I want to get from you really quick is what delights you in the work that you're doing?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but I think when I know if I made a difference for someone, it really makes everything I do worthwhile. So even though it may be really hard in the moment doing a startup and all the things, if I helped one woman make progress or get success or do a connection, an introduction, alliance, whatever, that really delights me. And then I have to say the other thing is my girls. My 2 daughters are amazing, and they inspire me every day to strive to be better, to do my best, because I want to make it something great for them in the future.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. Yeah. So in other words, when you're talking about what it is that you appreciate, what you're doing, you're mattering, right? People want to matter. That's what we're up to here, right? So we've done it. We've got through the show already. We're at the end. Say in about 15 seconds, what would you like to leave our listeners with today?
I would love for people to join Women's Equality Day. If you go to Eventbrite, we're going to have a great session on Women's Equality Day, and visit HerCsuite.com if you want to learn more about all the amazing women that are in our community.
Awesome. Natalie, thank you so much for joining me. You were just a pleasure to have on. I so enjoyed getting to know you and sharing.
It was wonderful to be here. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Listeners, viewers, if you want to learn more about Natalie Benamou and what she's up to at Her Power to Lead, visit that website. It's herpower2.com. So it's HerPower, then number 2.com. And thanks again to our partnering sponsor, WorkProud, which helps companies build a platform where your workforce receives meaningful feedback. And thanks for the work from people across your company. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it in the recorded podcast. We were on there with Scott Warwick talking about the importance of the 5 skills he teaches as an employment attorney and HR professional to learn tolerance and diversity and inclusion initiatives. Next week, we'll be on the air with Deborah Westfall talking about her new book, Convergence, Technology, Business, and the Human-Centric Future. See you there. Remember that work is at least a third of our life, so let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.